This is a video about Feathers McGraw from Wallace and Gromit. Your comments and searches on this topic are much appreciated. When Israel falsely claimed that babies had been beheaded, we saw wall-to-wall media coverage and a US president claiming that he had personally seen the evidence, but no such evidence existed because it was a lie. We are now seeing actual beheaded babies. Their crime? Being born Palestinian. Where is the media outrage? Where are the heads of state queuing up to condemn the killers? I don't know if people actually realise that we are witnessing the final stages of a genocide. The so-called Trump plan is straight up genocide. It proposes the complete eradication of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, the US colonising it on behalf of Israel, and the construction of a shiny new resort area. Netanyahu is openly saying that this is now the mission in Gaza, and that is what Israeli forces are currently doing. And this is happening not just with US and UK complicity, but with active involvement. The UK, for example, flies more reconnaissance missions for Israel over Gaza than any other country, including the US. Israel follows up these missions with swift bombing of the areas under surveillance. Frankly, I don't know how anyone can discuss parliamentary politics without qualifying every sentence with "they're all war criminals," because it's not just Netanyahu and his cronies who belong in The Hague. It's Sunak, Starmer, Biden, Trump, Lammy, Cleverly, Cameron and all their little cronies who sat in cabinet meetings and parliament and said nothing. Or worse, justified it and implemented policies that actively participated in it. And you can add 90% of journalists from legacy media to that list as well. They saw the evidence, but rather than actually doing their jobs and holding power to account, they instead became its mouthpiece, betraying their colleagues in Gaza and giving rhetorical cover to one of the greatest crimes against humanity in living memory. And let's be clear, nobody can say they didn't know. Millions of people have marched, protested, taken direct action. Hundreds of pages of evidence have been presented to the ICJ by the few countries trying to prevent this. We can see the evidence on our social media feeds day in, day out. We can see the civilians, mostly women and children, targeted by the IDF. We can see the statistics showing that 80% of those killed by the IDF are civilians and that over 33%, the single largest group, are children. We can see that this is the deadliest war for journalists and humanitarian aid workers this century. We can follow the narrative thread from the first school being bombed and Israel insisting it couldn't possibly be their doing, to August last year, by which time over 85% of schools had been subjected to airstrikes. So let nobody say they didn't know. They did know, and they picked a side. And they'll get away with it too, because Western politicians and leaders always do. But we can hold them accountable as best we can. We can ensure that they're never allowed to forget what they did. We can make sure they're never welcome in any public space. And we should. We owe it to the tens of thousands murdered by Israeli forces so far, to the children shot in the head by Israeli snipers, and to the paramedics and aid workers executed and buried with their ambulances by IDF forces. And we owe it, to humanise this, to Hind Rajab, to Sidra Hasuna, to Mohammed Bar, none of whom could possibly have had the capacity to fully understand what was happening to them, but all of whom were brutally murdered by an occupying power.